Hey guys, it's Maggie and I am back tonight to talk about the first 6 months in which I absolutely hated having an ostomy. That is really hard to say as self-proclaimed queen of ostomies, but I want to be real with you and share some of the more difficult moments that I had in about the first 6 months of having my ostomy. Before we get into this video, I do want to remind you guys that I am on the live chat for the premiere of this video, so if you're watching this video premiere, no, this way. I'm over here. If you are on a desktop, there's like a live chat feature over on this side. Or if you are on mobile, there should be something underneath of the video that says live chat. It's like a little icon. So if you click on that, I am in the live chat and we can chat it up. Also, thank you to the members that joined my channel. I so appreciate it, and your names are going to be listed at the end of this video. Okay, let's talk about how much I hated my ostomy. I have seen over the last however long I've been on YouTube comments saying, how are you so positive, Maggie, when you're dealing with all of this? Or I've seen comments from patients that may be facing ostomy surgery and they're trying to make that decision and they're just wondering how I'm still living life with it. I wanted to be real about the very early on days of having my ostomy and just kind of share some of those memories with you. I realized that that decision to have ostomy surgery is an extremely tough one, and for good or for bad, I never had to make that decision. It was made for me in a life or death situation. I'll tell you a little bit about that story. I know a lot of you guys are probably sick of that story if you've been on this channel for a while. So when I was 16, I was going to have my first resection surgery, and that was just to remove my terminal ileum, not even the whole thing, just a little bit of it, as well as a little bit of my colon. So I had that surgery in October of 2009. And about a week after that surgery, I was seemingly doing fine in the hospital, started eating again, and then I got really, really sick, and it was discovered that where they sewed the intestines back together fell apart because we did not address my final stricture in my rectum. So things just couldn't get out of me, which meant that my intestines burst open. I wound up with peritonitis and I almost died. Yeah, that's how we started this journey. I'm so thankful to the surgeon that saved my life. I will always remember his name. And he was such a nice guy that when I started working at the same hospital that I was a patient at, he saw me in the hallway and like called me out by full name. So he was like, how are you? So he wound up having to do a large midline incision, had to basically hose me out from all the stuff that I had eaten that week, and gave me an ostomy to hopefully heal me, with the intent to reverse it. At some point down the line, they said maybe 6 months to a year after that surgery. Had I been prepped for ostomy surgery or anything like that? No. I do remember a WCN coming into my room before I went down to that emergency surgery. I remember being in absolute agony, feeling like a fire was set inside of me, and her doing the markings for where my stoma might be, and I basically at that point was like, do whatever you have to. Knock me out because I can't handle this anymore. It was the worst pain and I have never felt anything like it since. But I never had any education or anything before that moment. Which when I tell you the next part, you might find a little weird. So the night before I had my resection surgery, I remember going into my dad's room. I've told this story before, whether or not you believe it, but I remember going into my dad's room saying, hey dad, tomorrow's the big surgery and I think I'm gonna wind up with an ostomy. Mind you, I had very little knowledge about ostomies. I had met exactly one person that had one, didn't currently have it at the time that I met them, but I knew one person. That was a camp counselor that I had met just a couple months prior, because I got the surgery in October and camp was in August, I believe. She was my camp counselor and she had gone through the J-pouch surgeries, so she had a temporary ostomy at one point, and she was sharing with, you know, my whole cabin about that process, and that was my only exposure to ostomies. And then of course I saw some people online, like on Facebook and on forums, talking about ostomies, but I really didn't know a whole lot of what that meant. But I remember telling my dad, yeah, I think at some point I'm gonna wind up with an ostomy. And he said, no, you're being silly, like you're gonna have your resection surgery and that's all. And as we know now, that was not what happened. I wound up with an ostomy. Don't know how I knew it was going to happen, but somehow I knew it was going to happen. I will never forget standing in the doorway of my dad's room telling him that. It's so weird. Going back to camp, it's really funny. I went 2 years to Camp Oasis, which was for patients with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And I remember my first year, the year that I met that counselor, being miserable. My belly was so large, I couldn't go to the bathroom because of my strictures. I was so sick. I was worried that I was gonna have accidents the whole time. I was 16 at the time, and I was so nervous about that. I'm gonna show you a picture of me at camp. I'm gonna blur out the other faces, but this was me at camp right here. I don't know if you can see on my face or just how I was postured, that I was so not confident about myself. I felt so sick. I couldn't eat anything. Basically, I was only eating my pills that, you know, the nurse came around and gave us. That was like such a weird memory. Camp was awesome. Camp was so great, but I felt so sick. And I was surrounded by people who understood, but I still felt so alone, which is sad. Not knowing that in just a couple of months I would get life-changing surgery, surgeries really, that would completely redirect my entire life. So it took me a while to realize that I had an ostomy. They were worried I wasn't going to make it through that surgery because I had gone septic. Not fun. So my first memories are not until I think a couple days after surgery. I had family members tell me that they came to visit, and I have no recollection of that at all. I'm like, I don't think you came. They're like, yeah, we came to visit you. And after that, I was in the hospital for about another month recovering because it was just, that was a lot. And I remember, I just look back at the education, and I mean, I worked at that hospital later on, and it definitely improved, but it was laughable what I had received. I had gotten a pamphlet, one single pamphlet. It was maybe like a trifold, and it had the very most basic information, and I think it was sponsored by like Coloplast or something. It was so basic and definitely not meant to teach you everything you should know about your ostomy, but it's basically the only thing I had to go on. The nurses, there were some that were absolutely fantastic and knew about ostomy care, and then I had other nurses that you didn't know a thing. I had a lot of trouble with leaking those first 6 months, and my bag would leak in the hospital, and I would complain that it was super itchy, and they would kind of tell me, you know, oh, well, that's gonna go away once your skin heals around your stoma. Okay, no, my bag was leaking. I remember getting a leak out the side of my ostomy bag and a nurse putting paste in there to try and stick it back to me. That's a huge no-no. You change your bag when it's leaking. You don't try to stick it back to the person. So my skin was destroyed, and it shouldn't have been, but there are a lot of things that patients go through, and it takes a lot of years to learn how to manage all these different medical devices and procedures, so I understand it from a nursing side. I totally get it. I had another nurse that emptied my bag one night, and I guess the way that I was sitting on the bed, they forgot to put the clip on the end of the bag. And the way I was sitting, the bag was folded up at the end, so I didn't know that it wasn't clipped until I tried to get out of bed. And it was my bag was full, and it just splashed all over the floor, and I stood there like crying, thinking that this is my life. This is what my life is. I can't go to school. I can't go to school and have this happen. I can't do anything. I can't go out of the house. That's what I thought. And I was 16. Not only was I managing the ostomy, which was huge, I also had a very large midline incision, which you guys have seen. Whenever I show my belly, you can see what that is now. Just kind of looks like a little canyon in me. That incision, unfortunately, was also a big source of issues. It dehisced, meaning it split open, which was painful, gross to watch. I used to have photos on my old laptop, and then that laptop's hard drive died. I wish I could show you what it looked like. We used to have to pack it because it had tunneled, meaning we took Q-tips and shoved gauze up into it. I don't even know how to describe it. So that was painful, and we were trying to get that to heal, and everybody was amazed looking at it. I mean, I remember the nurse practitioners would call in all of their nurse practitioner buddies to look at this thing. So I was dealing with that, and then the third thing that I was dealing with that thankfully resolved itself and I didn't wind up having to do, but I was being TPN fed. I was no longer able to eat by mouth at all because of how much damage my intestines had gone through. So if I'm ever wearing a lower cut shirt, you might be able to see. I don't know if you can see it on here. Let me look at my monitor here. Okay, do you see that white dot right there? There's a couple of them. That is my central line scar. So I did have a central line for that month. I was going through TPN and I was trained. We had to be trained, my dad and I, on how to care for my central line and start TPN on myself. And I would say my dad was most fearful over that. He was so afraid that I was gonna go home and get a blood infection because you have to be extremely careful. You have to do sterile technique with central lines. He was terrified of it, and so was I. I was so afraid I was going to get sick from this thing. But we went through all of the training on TPN and lipids and all that stuff, which was very helpful when I became a nurse. But it was really great because after we took my colon out of the equation and I just had the ostomy bag, the pain went away, or, you know, the Crohn's pain went away. The surgery pain stuck around for a long time, but the Crohn's pain went away. I started to be able to eat and absorb nutrients, and so I gained a lot of weight in the hospital, which my doctors were extremely happy about, so I could go home not on TPN. I did have my central line removed before I went home. So going home with a new ostomy, that was the worst. That was the worst. I did not go back to school right away, and when I did go back to school, I did partial days. Like, I would go in for an hour for a week, and then I would go in for 2 hours the next week. I had to go back very slowly because I was so weak. And also we were having so many appointments and so many home nurses come over, and my schedule was busy even though I was trying to recover. I remember doing bag changes with my dad in those first couple of weeks, and nobody teaches you how to change an ostomy bag when your stoma's very active. And I have an ileostomy, so I have a lot looser output, and it kind of just comes whenever it wants to. It seems like sometimes, but just very watery. And on more than one occasion, I remember sitting in the bathtub naked because we were trying to change my ostomy bag and it would not stop going. So very difficult to change an ostomy when you're going through that. And I would sit there crying, feeling like I was glued to the shower because I couldn't change my bag. And thankfully over time, we learned techniques of, you know, basically recognizing when my stoma was more active, so picking the times that it was less active to change the bag, as well as taking a paper towel, folding it a couple times so it was a little bit thicker, and then kind of wrapping it around the stoma so it had a little bit of room to absorb any output while we could go around and clean my skin and put on skin barrier, whatever. So we learned those techniques on our own because we had to come up with our own methods. The method that we were taught, and you guys might laugh at this if you have a stoma, the method we were taught in the hospital, if my stoma was being active, was to take a cotton ball with a little bit of lubricant and stick it on the end of the stoma. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. If your stoma's active, if it's really going, that cotton ball is going to shoot off, okay? It's going to across the room. I also remember us talking to the home care nurses and explaining, like, the bag keeps leaking, we can't get this thing to stick, which I just mentioned in Monday's video that I was very thin after ostomy surgery, so my hip bone was like out into tomorrow, which meant where my ostomy was, my stoma was like in a fold. Like, the stoma would be right here, and this is my hip, and this is like my rib cage. So we had to use one pieces that were super flexible to fit into there, but we had to learn that on our own because the home nurses, they were more concerned about the incision than they were the care of the ostomy, which just bugs me because if the ostomy leaks into my incision, that's not good. That's not a good thing. In those first few weeks, the most helpful resource we actually found was the supply company. My dad would call them and say, hey, here's the issue we're having. Like, what products do you think might work? And they were the most helpful. And they would send supplies out. They would tell us how they worked. And that got us through a lot of that time. Like I said before, going back to school was really, really slow. It was my junior year, and I missed a lot of junior year things. I missed junior prom. I remember my friends sending me pictures saying, you know, we miss you, Maggie, while I'm sitting in the hospital, just kind of waiting to break out. And going back to school was really, that was a really rough time. So when I finally got back to school full time, I was not only doing school full time, but I was also having after school teaching. My teachers would come to my house after school, and then I would learn all the stuff I missed earlier in the year. And a lot of that stuff you learned earlier in the year dealt with what I was currently learning while actually in school, normal hours, so I didn't quite get what was going on in school during normal hours. I felt lost, and I broke down on so many teachers. At my kitchen table, I feel super bad. Thankfully, my counselor at my school was amazing. He was such a good guy. He visited me at the house, not just to talk about school, but he would come to visit me and just see how I'm doing and chat about life. And his name was Mr. Snyder, so I will always remember that. While going to school, once I was back full time, my bag still would leak every single day. We were doing bag changes at least once a day. It took me a while to finally kind of round out my belly a little bit. I remember exactly where the bathroom is in my high school cafeteria. You know, I would like walk in, walk to the back of the room. I remember the tile on the floor. Oh, I remember the layout of the bathroom, like where the sinks were, and going into the stall every day at lunch and seeing that my bag was leaking. Thankfully, I had the ostomy bags that had the fabric around the edges, so it was kind of like I could see that it was leaking, and pretty soon it would reach the outside, but it wasn't currently like getting everywhere. And I remember there being some issue where the school would not allow me to keep ostomy supplies on my person, and I would have to go to the nurse and keep supplies there, except I never wanted to do that because I never wanted to be a burden to people. I didn't like going to the nurse because I would literally be there every day, and that didn't sound fun to me, so I would shove tissue paper all around the edge of my flange, and then I would go about my day, get home, and change it with my dad. The other part of it too was that I don't believe that the nurse either knew how to change ostomy bags or like they weren't allowed to because it was a little more in-depth. I'm not really sure why. There was more reasons than me just not wanting to go to the nurse of why we didn't do that. But I couldn't change my ostomy bag myself at that point. I was too afraid to touch the skin, touch the stoma. I was afraid of all of it. My dad did every bag change, so I'd wait until school was over and I would go straight home and he would help me change my bag. And I thought, okay, I guess this is my life. I'm going to feel disgusting for the rest of my life. Cool. So I had a friend in high school who, really nice girl, still like see her online today. She had ulcerative colitis, still does, I assume, has ulcerative colitis, and she had met this guy that was like in a band with her boyfriend, and she knew that he had Crohn's too, and he had an ostomy, and so she wanted us to talk. We talked online, and then we met in person. We did wind up dating for a really short time. I think he's on my YouTube channel like years and years back. But he was a huge part of me, like, kind of pushing myself. I was a few years younger than him, and he was super independent with his ostomy care. And I was like, well, I can't call my dad every time my bag leaks when he's over the house. Like, I want to be independent too. So I forced myself to learn how to change my ostomy bag. That gave me a lot of independence. And at the same time, I was starting to gain even more weight, feel more confident with myself, feel better, feel stronger, healing from surgery. My incisions were closing. I really started to become Maggie, like today's Maggie. And I got involved online. Like, I would go on Facebook and find people with Crohn's disease or ostomy bags, and there wasn't really a whole lot online. And that was about the time that I made my first YouTube video being like, hello, is anybody else out there? That was about that time, and I started to meet people online. Some of you may know Sarah Ringer. You can find her on Instagram, and I think she has a website too. She is awesome, and I have only met her in person one time at Healthy Voices. She is my IBD big sister. She has guided me through this, whether or not she knows it. I think she knows it. She guided me and supported me and was just so kind to me in a time where I was trying to figure out who I was with an ostomy, and who I was just me. Just me with, you know, myself, ignoring the diseased part of me. I also met Geraldine Taylor online. She had a book come out, and I got that book, and she talked about her growing up and living life with 2 ostomy bags. And I did eventually meet Geraldine Taylor in person just a couple years ago, actually. We have funny memories because we stayed at the same hotel in Cleveland, and there was a weirdo hotel desk guy that was a little creepy, so she protected me from him. It led to me meeting all of these amazing people, building long-term friendships. I would say the Crohn's people and the ostomy people, I have built the strongest friendships with. It led to me learning about different products and getting to work with companies and sharing them on YouTube. It led to a lot of things. And my dad always said, you know, this kid made lemonade out of lemons, and Maggie gets on her bullhorn to shout out to anybody who will listen about ostomies, which is kind of true. It's definitely true. And it got me to this point where today I do not hate my ostomy. I look back to meeting with my surgeon in those first 6 months and saying every time, so when are we doing the reversal surgery? When's that? Like, when are we planning that? And I would kind of get vague answers because I think maybe he knew that I wasn't going to heal. My rectum was in rough shape, and it was very diseased. It's like the Crohn's said, go to the rectum, guys. We're tearing this apart. I don't know if he knew that that was going to be the case, or he wanted me to be in a really good place for reversal, and I just never got there. But I think about that, begging to have my reversal surgery, and then after that 6-month point where things started to just change, and I was like, wow, my ostomy is like pretty great. I feel really good. I'm learning to manage it. I'm not dealing with leaks anymore because I've figured out what products work for me. It just changed everything. Would I go back if I could, if I knew it was gonna happen, and like try and not get an ostomy, try to avoid that? Or would I wish to not have a terrible, terrible rectum and avoid all of this? I don't know. I know that some people really say, like, of course I would wish not to have any of this, to never go through it. But at the same time, I'm absolutely terrified of what I would be like without all of this. I don't know where I would be in life. I don't know what I would be doing. And also, I've lived so long not going to the bathroom that I really find people that go to the bathroom bizarre. Like, wait, what are you doing in there? Like, why are you in the bathroom so long? What's wrong? What's going on? It doesn't take you 2 seconds to go to the bathroom? What's your problem? So, I hope that wherever you are, if you're getting an ostomy, you have one, or maybe you don't have anything wrong with you and you are good to go and you're just curious. I hope that this encourages you, whether or not you want to be open and talk about your ostomy or you are more reserved about it, whatever situation you're in, no matter how old you are or how young you are, I hope that this long video, long enough that I had to hit record twice, I hope that it really does encourage you and gives you hope for the future. That maybe you might hate your ostomy right now, but you might not in the future. All right, guys, thank you for sticking out this long video, and I will see you very soon. Bye, guys.